Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AIMS Discussion Group Research Forum 2025. We are a member of the ACRL discussion groups, and our section is welcoming volunteers and new members. So please join. Take a look at our website. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask myself, Triveni Kuchi, or Deepa Banerjee. We're both co-conveners of AAMESDG. I am Triveni Kuchi, Social Sciences Instructional Services Librarian, working with South Asian Studies, Middle Eastern Studies, and other areas at Rutgers University. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. Thank you for taking the time to attend this program. A couple of quick reminders before we get started. We have over 200 registrations, and I would please ask you to mute your microphone as you enter or while you are listening to the speakers, so it will be a smooth process. Do feel free to introduce yourselves on chat. Please post your questions as well on chat. And we will soon get a few more instructions from our moderator. So without much further ado, I will introduce Stephen Witt, our moderator for today's program. Let me just, Dr. Steve Witt is a professor and head of International Area Studies at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where he is the subject specialist for global studies and Japanese studies. Since 2015, he has served as the director of UIUC's Center for Global Studies, where he led the development of the new Master's in Global Studies degree program, and serves as the principal investigator of the U.S. Department of Education's National Resource Center and Foreign Language and Area Studies grants. Dr. Witt is also the editor of the IFLA Journal, the official publication of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. His research focuses on the trajectory and impact of international developments in library and information science, placing global trends in librarianship and knowledge production within the context of broader social and technological changes. One of his long-term projects examines the public information campaigns of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, particularly their efforts to internationalize public opinion through library collections, book distribution, and academic networking. Dr. Witt earned both his Master of Science in Library and Information Science and his Doctor of Philosophy, a PhD, from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. In addition to his roles at the International and Area Studies Library and the Center for Global Studies, he's a faculty affiliate of the European Union Center and the Center for Asian and Pacific Studies at Illinois. On to you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. I was looking for my camera button there. So thank you very much for the very gracious introduction. I think one thing you didn't mention is I'm not an expert in AI. So as your moderator, I'm a fellow traveler in trying to understand how we're going to integrate and regulate and use these technologies especially within the context of area studies. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's research forum, Artificial Intelligence, Implications for Area Studies Research, Collections, and Libraries. So it's my pleasure today to serve as your moderator for the session. So I'll say a few introductory words, then I'll introduce our two speakers, after which we'll have a chance to discuss further their presentations, and at the end, a chance for everyone here to ask questions that they may have. So please feel free to post them in chat, and our colleagues will help to moderate those as well. Area studies librarians and scholars have long played a critical role in preserving and providing access to complex and often underrepresented sources of knowledge from around the world. The advent of artificial intelligence, from machine translation and natural language processing to large-scale data mining, presents exciting opportunities to expand and deepen this work. And it also surfaces profound ethical and epistemological questions. Many of the area studies collections were shaped by historical dynamics of power and scholarly interest originating from the global north. As we digitize these collections and they become integrated into AI systems, we must confront the fact that they reflect not only the collection development, not only the richness of global cultures, but also the limitations and biases of past research agendas and collection development practices. Left unexamined, these biases risk being perpetuated and scaled by AI systems that are often treated as neutral, but are in fact shaped by what data is available, data infrastructure, and of course, implicit assumptions and bias. Furthermore, the corpus used to train large language models is highly uneven. Many indigenous languages and cultural traditions, as well as the material stewarded by scholars and communities in the Global South, are underrepresented or excluded altogether. This raises urgent questions about autonomy, consent, and digital sovereignty. Who determines what knowledge becomes data? Who controls whether cultural heritage materials are included in training sets, and under what terms? And yet it's important to recognize that our colleagues in the Global South are not passive actors in this landscape. As research recently published in the IFLA Journal and other journals suggests, librarians and scholars across the Global South are actively exploring how AI can advance local priorities, expand access, and build sustainable knowledge infrastructures. Our colleagues are not simply adopting existing tools, but reimagining their possibilities. This presents a real opportunity for collaboration, grounded not in extraction, but in equity. How can we co-create tools, standards, and training that reflect diverse needs and epistemologies? How can we support reciprocal, respectful partnerships that empower all regions to contribute meaningfully to the future of AI in research? Today's forum is an opportunity to engage these and other questions, and we're joined by two outstanding speakers whose work offers rich insights into the ethical, infrastructural, and scholarly dimensions of AI and cultural knowledge. I'll be introducing our first two speakers, and then we'll begin with Dr. Lisa Yallant. Dr. Lisa Yallant will be speaking on working across disciplines and sectors, focusing on AI and archives. She is a professor of digital cultural heritage at Loughborough University, and has a background in publishing history and digital humanities. She's an expert on born digital archives and the issue of preservation and access to these archives. Since 2020, she has been a UK PI for 4 AHRC-funded projects on archives and artificial intelligence. These international projects aim to make digitized and born digital archives more accessible to researchers and to use innovative research methods such as AI to analyze archival data. She enjoys working across sectors and disciplines. As a digital humanist, she has extensive experience in collaborating with computer scientists, archivists, librarians, and government professionals to unlock digital archival data with innovative technologies. Our second speaker will be Dr. Andreas Sudman. He'll be speaking on machine learning, virtual areas, and the Global South. Andreas Sudman is a media scholar at Bonn University with a special interest in AI. Currently, he is the principal investigator of the international research group HIAICS, How is Artificial Intelligence Changing Science? Research in the area of learning algorithms, funded by the Volkswagen Foundation since 2019. From 2019 to 2022, he has been the director of the research project Media and Infrastructures of AI, Computer Vision, Transfer Learning, and Artificial Neural Networks as Black Boxed, funded by the German Research Foundation. He is co-editor of the series AI Critique, published by Transcript. Roughly 10 years ago, Andreas Sudman was one of the first scholars outside of natural sciences to address the new relevance of machine learning technologies. For his work on AI, he has been awarded several national and international fellowships and has published broadly in German and in English on these topics. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Yolande to begin.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thank you for this generous introduction. So hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, so I'm trying to make it full screen. Okay, so again, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to present my work. So the title of my talk today is Working Across Disciplines and Sectors, and obviously I'm going to talk about AI and archives. So we're all familiar with fake news and deep fakes. We all know that it's possible to create fake versions of the news using generative AI. And it is, of course, surprisingly easy to do that. You don't need any technical knowledge to create false versions of the present. You just need access to the internet. And the same is true of the past. I mean, rewriting history is an old temptation, and it is now remarkably easy to falsify the past. As we all know, videos and digital creations can betray not only the present, but also the past. And let me take an example of this. So this is from the photographer Alexei Yurenev, who gathered family albums and archives on his grandfather, who was a Soviet hero of the Red Army. And he then asked an AI to create photos of the Second World War showing his ancestor. And the results are so convincing that even veterans saw there were real photos. And the AI-generated photos are shown as part of an exhibition in Brussels at the moment. So if you're based in Brussels, don't hesitate to go there. It's quite stunning. So the big question, of course, is which version of history will endure? As I said, rewriting history is an old temptation. I mean, think of Stalin, who erased his political opponents from photographs. And we now have AI-generated photos and videos of the past. It is understandable that these changes create anxiety. In his novel 1984, George Orwell famously wrote, and I quote, "Who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past." So AI can be seen as a danger and a threat, but it can also be seen as an opportunity. Fighting against fake news and fake history would require an army of journalists, fact-checkers, and historians. And in practice, manually checking huge amounts of data is not feasible. I mean, the big thing here is that AI is no longer a choice, it is a necessity. It's no longer a choice, it is a necessity. I'm repeating myself because, I think this is absolutely central here. AI is a necessity to fact-check digital data, and it is also a necessity to make archival records more accessible. Just a few examples here. AI can automatically create metadata, which is particularly useful when metadata is missing or contains problematic language. AI can also be used to search vast amounts of data and automatically identify and remove rot materials, so redundant, outdated, and trivial materials, leaving only materials worth preserving. And within this mass of important documents, AI can then filter sensitive and confidential information, making it possible for archivists to set closure periods for these problematic records and to open up non-sensitive records for research. In addition, so end users, so people like myself, historians and other users, can draw on AI as a research method to analyze huge masses of documents much more efficiently than through manual search. We all know about the rise of ChatGPT and other Gen AI tools that offer great opportunities for archive users to ask questions using natural language and to get personalized responses. AI agents will go even further, performing tasks autonomously on behalf of the user. With the promise of artificial general intelligence, AGI, coming up in the near future, AI could reach human-level intelligence and fully revolutionize access to our digital past. And it is, of course, true that AI comes with enormous risks, including the risk of rewriting our digital past and even deleting vast amounts of records. But I think, and this is really central here, I think we should stop obsessing about doomsday scenarios. I think archival institutions and users like myself should fully embrace AI as a collaborative agent to unlock hidden histories, transform access to memory, and also to enhance creative innovations. We need to recognize that there is no turning back to a world without AI. It's now essential to think clearly about how archival institutions could use technology to unleash their collections and connect with unprecedented numbers of users. So here are some key questions I want to ask today. The first one is, what does the future of archives and accessibility look like at a time of rapid technological advances and fears of rogue AI? How can this powerful technology transform the archival sector for public good and enhance creative innovation? And finally, what role can researchers and other users play in this AI revolution? So without strong records management, the transparency and accountability that underpin democracies are threatened. Journalists and other users need access to records to make government accountable. Archival materials are also essential for historians. Any narration on the human past relies, of course, on available records, selected, preserved, and made accessible. And without these records, the risk is that fake news and fake history will not be noticed or challenged. For most of the 20th century, democratic countries had processes in place to make sure that paper records deemed worthy of interest, like government records, personal papers of distinguished individuals, were securely preserved. So access was then given in archival repositories, sometimes after a period of time, in the case of sensitive and confidential records. And it is, of course, true that paper archives could easily be destroyed. I mean, as happened for many colonial archival collections, in an effort to hide facts that could be embarrassing for the former colonizers. And these processes and systems were not only fragile, they also frequently relied on the exclusion of women and minorities, focusing instead on white male leaders. But they at least ensured that a selection of important records was discoverable and usable. So, of course, the digital revolution has deeply disrupted these established archival systems. PDFs and Word documents replaced paper reports, emails and instant messages replaced letters, audio and video files were saved on computers without always checking that appropriate metadata would make these records discoverable. As you know, information and records management professional uses phrase digital heap. So digital heap, that's a phrase to describe collections of unorganized, unstructured digital documents and information stored outside of systems of control. Archival records that should be carefully labeled, languish on computer systems, and are at risk of format obsolescence and accidental deletion. So, of course, that creates two kinds of problems. Problems in the short term, when you have these disorganized records that lead to an increasing liability and compliance risks for government and other organizations. But also problem in the long term with the disorganization and lack of active preservation that have an impact on what is transmitted to archival repositories and therefore what is accessible and usable for historians and other users. So for digital records that are transmitted to archival repositories, access is often extremely complicated. As we all know, data protection, that's one issue, copyright, that's another issue, and also, I should say, risk aversion on the side of many archival institutions. It's often easy to just in a way not to allow users to access documents that could be a bit problematic. So AI is essential to make digital archives more accessible to users. The AI revolution implies a change of perspective, especially in the archive sector, a sector that has sometimes shown distrust of technology and of users. Let me take an example of this, and this is from 1994, a wonderful article by Terry Cook, the famous archivist Terry Cook, who published an article entitled Electronic Records, Paper Mines, the Revolution in Information Management and Archives in the Post-Custodial and Post-Modernist Era. So basically for Cook, it was necessary, and I quote here, to develop new thinking and new approaches for the electronic records. And he wrote, again I quote, "We have paper minds trying to cope with electronic realities." And let me show you this longer quote because I think this is important here. If we as information professionals can guide our sponsors and users from masses of specific information onto knowledge and even wisdom, we will be secure indeed in the new age and make a valuable contribution to society and posterity. If not, we will be replaced by software packages that can handle facts and data and information very efficiently without any mediation by archivists or anyone else. And now we are 3 decades later, technology has largely taken over this role as a guide to a mass of information, including through AI-powered search and ChatGPT-style queries. So, big question here. Does this mean that archivists and information professionals should find another job? Well, perhaps you've seen this picture on LinkedIn comparing the traditional archivist with the dodo. Well, personally, I don't think that archivists will disappear. In an age of fake news and disinformation, it is more than ever necessary to have professionals able to distinguish between trustworthy information on the one side and untrustworthy information on the other side. And the big thing here is that these professionals, these archival professionals, do not need to have a background in computer science, but they do need to actively engage with new technological advances. Central to this engagement is the focus on users and their needs to access records, including records that are difficult to discover for all kinds of reasons. So we talked about the lack of metadata, the sensitivity, data protection issues, etc., that can make access to records, very, very complicated. I can see some, I can hear some noise, so if you can mute yourself, that would be fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
Okay. Do you want to mute yourself, perhaps? Thank you so much. Okay, so I was saying that artificial intelligence offers groundbreaking opportunities for record creators, archival institutions, and end users, but it also comes with risks. So what are the big risks here? So flawed AI systems can incorrectly label important records as rot, leading to their automatic deletion. Moreover, AI systems do not always correctly identify sensitive documents, since sensitivity is often dependent on a specific context. And finally, and we hear about this quite a lot, we have the black box issue, the fact that the decisions taken by the AI can be difficult to understand and explain, and that can lead to problems of accountability and transparency. So in short, AI is not the panacea to the problems associated with digital records. Optimism is needed to fully harness the potential of AI, but it needs to be a nice, wide open kind of optimism. I think we need optimism to make our archives more discoverable and more accessible. And above all, we need collaborations across disciplines and sectors. You remember the title of my talk is really about this kind of collaboration across disciplines and sectors. So I think we need to think differently about academic disciplines. Generally in academia, when we talk about interdisciplinary work, we think of disciplines that are actually very close, like literature and history. When you have a literary scholar and a historian who work together, well, we say that's interdisciplinary work. And I work in the UK, and every 7 years or so, we need to submit our research outputs to the REF, the Research Excellence Framework. I'm a literary scholar by training, and I still publish monographs and articles in English literature. Just to give you an example here, this is the cover of my new monograph on women poets and male publishers in post-1960s Britain. This is based on extensive archival works, both in paper collections, but also in born digital collections. And by the way, this book is available open access if you're interested. But really the big point here is that, I'm a literary scholar by training, but I also work in digital humanities, and I've done this work for many years now. So at the moment, I'm based in a communication and media department. So really, my work is at the crossroads between English literature and communication and media. And this creates all kinds of practical problems, for the REF, even though I'm still in this broad category of arts and humanities. And I'm giving you this example because I think it shows the rigidity of the academic system, when it comes to disciplines. You need to fit within a single discipline, really, especially for the REF. So I think to solve this problem of inaccessible archives, we need collaborations across disciplines that are radically different, including the humanities and computer science, so disciplines that generally do not speak to each other. And we also need to work with professionals outside academia, so people like yourself, in the libraries, archives, and museum sector, but also in the government sector. And since 2020, I've been working on AI and archives across disciplines and sectors. As Steve mentioned earlier, I've led several projects as UK PI. Many of these international projects have been funded in the UK by the Arts and Humanities Research Councils, the AHRC. Let me give you a few examples of this, and perhaps we can start with the Aeolian project. So Aeolian, that's a project which I led in the UK, and we also had a team in the US, so it's on AI for cultural organizations. And we've just published an edited collection, this month. It's called Navigating AI for Cultural Heritage Organizations. It's published by UCL Press, and it's open access. So you can find the link on the UCL Press website, or you can just go to my website, lizjayan.com, and you will find it very easily. And we have chapters, by academics, by people in the GLAM sector, and other stakeholders. So I think it's an interesting edited collection, and really I would encourage you to have a look if you're interested. And also we published a special issue in Journal of Computing and Cultural Heritage last last year. So you can find the link on the Aeolian website. You have it on the slide. Let me show you another example that might be relevant to this group. So this is the ICON project. So for this one, we finished it last year. I was the UK PI and we had a French team as well. And really it's on AI applied to colonial photographs. So of course, these colonial photographs can be very problematic, sometimes showing violence and sensitive content. And we used AI in a responsible way to make those archives more accessible to users. We published a special issue as well in Digital Humanities Quarterly last year. So again, have a look if you're interested. And the good news is I got some funding from the British Academy, to continue the project. So it's still going on, and hopefully it will expand beyond the UK and France in the future. A final example of the projects I've been doing, this is a Luster project, which is on AI applied to government records. And this one has been delivered in partnership with the Cabinet Office. So initially it was funded by the HRC, but I got some internal funding to continue the project. And actually we are going to organize a workshop in Manchester with the Cabinet Office next month in July. So that's still going on. And now it's more like a UK-US project, which is quite exciting, because of course when we are talking about the problems of government archives, inaccessible government archives, often it's not like a UK problem, it's much broader than that. So for this particular project, we published again a special issue in AI and Society. Most of the articles are open access, so please have a look, and you can find the link on our website luster-network.net. So Luster and the new follow-on project, which is called GLOW, have been delivered in partnership with the Cabinet Office. So for those of you who don't really know the Cabinet Office, well, it's a central government department in the UK. It supports the UK Prime Minister in the effective running of government, and it takes a lead on critical policy areas. So, for example, it played a crucial role in overseeing negotiations to leave the European Union. Its records combine those of the Prime Minister, cabinet proceedings, government efficiency and reform, and the formulation of legislation, among other areas. So really, we are talking about some of the most important records that are deposited at the National Archives, TNA, in the UK. So the Cabinet Office have big challenges, they face at the moment, including a historically poor records management system and corrupted metadata. So basically, they needed to find a way to apply retention and destruction decisions to a backlog of millions of digital records. And let me give you an example of the kind of challenges that they have. This is from a blog post that David Canning, who's the head of knowledge and information management at the Cabinet Office, he wrote this blog post in 2023, and he said, in one of our heaps, there were over 11 million files, all of which needed to be reviewed before they could either be retained as a historic record or destroyed. We estimated that it would take one person 59 years to read them all. And if we attempted to employ 59 people to complete the task in 1 year, the pay bill would exceed £2 million. So basically, a large number of these files are historically significant. But without automation, the risk is that digital heaps of unstructured and unmanaged records keep growing. The lack of discoverability and accessibility lead to a lack of transparency and accountability, and even to legal liability. Think of freedom of information request and public inquiries. I mean, when you have this kind of public inquiries, you need to find the information very quickly. And if the records are scattered on various systems and difficult to discover and to find, well, this is a big issue. So, so that's in the short term, but in the long term, the inability to find, select, and transfer important records has an impact on the historical archive available to researchers and other users in archival institutions. So basically, we did some new work on AI applied to government records at the Cabinet Office in order to identify those historically significant records to preserve, and also in order to identify records that can be deleted, records that are not historically significant. So I don't really have time to go into details, but if you're interested, have a look at the articles that I co-wrote with David Canning at the Cabinet Office. It's part of the special issue I was telling you about, in AI and society, and it was published in February this year. And it's open access, by the way, so you can have a look at this easily if you're interested. So let me move on to my conclusion here. So at the beginning of this talk, I said that we should stop obsessing about doomsday scenarios. Instead, we should fully embrace AI as a collaborative agent to unlock archives, transform access to memory, and shape the digital future. So that does not mean that everything should be accessible online to everyone all the time. And let me take a final example. So this example is from the Wellcome collection, a major collection of medical images in the UK. And the Wellcome has been experimenting with AI to suggest similar images and thus to provide more context on a collection. So they call that the visually similar images tool. And this tool allows for certain images to be brought together without relying on metadata. However, computer vision tools for historical images and illustrations are notoriously inaccurate. As one staff member of the Wellcome Trust told us, we did interviews and they told us it was hard for the computer vision algorithm to differentiate between pictures of meat and pictures of gory surgery. An algorithm doesn't necessarily know how to differentiate that context. And there are also examples of inappropriate images suggested by this tool, the visually similar images tool. So let me give you just one final example here. So for example, the Wellcome collection features a poster of a breastfeeding mother used in a health campaign in Belgium after the Second World War, alongside a picture of a male prostitute that you can see at the bottom. And basically the caption and the date of the picture, the 1990s, in the case of the photograph at the bottom, well, that bears little resemblance with the metadata for the breastfeeding poster. Those images obviously are not similar. And also, if you look at the visual aspects of the two pictures, they are completely dissimilar with, two women and a baby on the one side and a young man on the other side. You can see also a disclaimer at the bottom, and it says that we use machine learning to find images in our collection with similar shapes and features. And then they say that users are invited to get in touch if something doesn't look right. So basically, the responsibility to report problems is transferred to users instead of resting with the archival institution, which I find a bit problematic here. And, if you click on the run by photograph, well, it will lead to sexually explicit pictures associated with health campaigns against AIDS in the 1990s. And these pictures are available without any content warnings, so you can just see them straight away. Again, I find this problematic because you could have a child working on a school project who could find these pictures accidentally, basically. So I think we need better content warnings, and we need better AI tools here. So just a few takeaway points for you, and that's useful for the discussion afterwards. Again, there are many issues with our digital world, including fake news, fake history, and violent materials available online. But we also need to be optimistic. Nothing will be achieved if we move away from technology. There is no going back in time. human-AI partnership has the power to unlock hidden memories and produce extraordinary creative innovation. And I think we need this collaboration across disciplines, humanities to computer science, and collaboration across sectors as well, as that's absolutely essential to unlock archives and innovation. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's really a wonderful talk, and I like your combination of optimism and warning. I think that'll lead to great discussion after our next speaker. So now I'd like to invite Dr. Andreas Sudman to present. Thank you.
Andreas, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, let me start again. Okay, so thanks again for the introduction, the kind introduction, and for the honor to be invited to give a keynote at such a significant event on this highly relevant topic. As perhaps some of you may be aware, a few years ago, I proposed the establishment of a new transdisciplinary research field I called AI area studies. My motivation was to come up with an alternative to digital area studies, partly motivated by the fact that the current dominant form of AI, which is machine learning based on artificial neural networks, is not merely a digital technology, but rather a quasi-analog post-digital technology of information processing. So since that time, significant developments have occurred in AI. We have seen the boom of generative AI and specifically LLMs. And coincidentally, during this period, the erosion of democracies worldwide had also progressed. And I think it's an important task for the field of area studies to reflect this development. Already in the introduction of the Democratization of AI book, I highlighted the fact that the rise of AI is happening at a time while democracy is in a state of a profound crisis. And this crisis of democracy is not limited to a certain region. In fact, it is a global phenomenon, but it also manifests as a crisis of regions or areas. For example, we can discuss the crisis of democracy as a European crisis, or we can discuss it as a crisis of the transatlantic relationship, or we can discuss it as an ongoing crisis of the global south. To understand these crises, we need to examine how AI now architects our political reality, specifically to examine how AI has become a crucial tool for engineering what I call virtual areas, which is why we also need to examine the material dimension of the virtual. When I speak of the virtual, I do not mean something illusory or unreal. Similar to the Deleuze idea of the virtual, I refer to a real dimension of potential, a field of latent forces, social tendencies, and structural relations that precedes and conditions any concrete, tangible outcome. The virtual is the space of what could be, and AI is increasingly playing an important role in sculpting this space. Algorithms, and specifically learning algorithms, are not limited to the function of creating online content. What they also do is that they structure the very conditions for political interests and social interactions, thereby generating powerful vectors towards either cohesion or polarization. And what we can observe here, yes.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
The slides don't seem to be.
Oh, sorry, sorry, this was just one slide. I have forgotten to activate it, sorry. So,
okay,
so I do not have to this is more like, just my agenda, and this, you do not see so much on the slides, except from the structuring. And what we can observe here is the direct mechanism where the AI-architected virtual, the field of latent narratives and social tendencies, flows into and shapes material events and political outcomes with unprecedented speed. The dynamic I just described is particularly acute in the Global South. The Global South is itself can be regarded as a potent virtual construct in global discourse. It is defined less by strict geography and more by a contested field of shared historical legacies and structural power imbalances. It is a post-colonial concept that highlights the persistence of colonial power structures in contemporary economics, politics, and culture. This shared history and structural positioning constitute a virtual field, a problem space of shared grievances and aspirations. It is in this historically constituted terrain that global powers now compete, where AI is now used as a primary instrument of power and control. They are not merely disseminating narratives, but are actively working to actualize specific potentials within this field, selectively amplifying latent conflicts or forging new solidarities, thus stabilizing or destabilizing regional politics from within and turning virtual force into a material consequence. To explain this thesis, I would like to structure my considerations today in 3 parts. First, I will outline the contours of the global democratic crisis as a specific crisis of legitimacy. In part 2 of my talk, I will detail the concrete mechanisms by which AI shapes political reality in terms of identity, affect, and narratives. In the final part, I will discuss these dynamics in the context of the Global South, examining its role as a both geopolitical proving ground for these new forms of power and an emergent site of resistance. So you already see the first part here displayed, and don't be afraid. This sounds like a long talk. I will stay within the 25 minutes. So about the erosion of democracy as a global and regional crisis. Let me first talk about the current crisis of democracy, which manifestly articulates itself differently at national and regional levels. For many years now, we witness a profound erosion of democratic values, declining trust in institutions, so normalizations of anti-democratic positions, and massive loss of credibility in media ecosystems. It is thus important to highlight that the political crisis of the present is also a profound crisis of representation, where traditional parties fail to bundle fragmented public opinion, leaving citizens with the feeling their voices are not heard. Ironically, and this is a central paradox specifically of our current situation, is that citizens consistently report high dissatisfaction with how democracy functions, yet they continue to value the idea of living in a democracy. This points to a specific deficit in what the political scientist Fritz Scharf conceptualized as output-oriented legitimacy. Scharf distinguishes between input-oriented legitimacy, government by the people based on participation and representation, and output-oriented legitimacy, government for the people based on the system's effectiveness in solving tangible problems. The current crisis is very much, I think, a crisis of failed output-oriented legitimacy. From the perspective of right-wing oriented citizens in Germany or the US, for example, democracy has failed to address problems of migration. For liberal and leftist people, democracy is doing not enough to address problems of climate change. In both cases, the gap between democratic aspiration and perceived reality creates a legitimacy vacuum, a concept that aligns with Jürgen Habermas' theory of a legitimation crisis, where administrative systems lose public confidence by failing to fulfill their practical functions. Illiberal forces are keen to exploit this, not by solving the problems, but by using AI to redirect public frustrations toward manufactured targets, turning a crisis of the system into a conflict within the system, within society. But the crisis of representation also points to a profound crisis of political critique. For instance, the critique of ideology as formulated by Theodor Adorno presupposes an intertwining of rational and irrational argumentation. an entanglement of the true and the false that can be rationally disentangled. But in an area of research and authoritarianism and post-truth politics, where facts are dismissed and arguments no longer count, the political discourse shifts from ideology to pure propaganda. While these problems now visibly affect Western democracies, recent geopolitical conflicts have seemingly shifted the public discourse away from the global South. And yet this perception is misleading. The dominant geopolitical rivalry in AI between the US and China is unthinkable without the global South, not just as a material, but as a virtual battleground. Why is it unthinkable? Because the global South is a key terrain upon which this rivalry unfolds. Not only is it the source of raw materials for AI hardware, it is also the provider of vast and often unregulated data sets and the contested market for technology-driven ideological influence. Both US and China are exporting their AI-driven governance models, one centered on market-driven surveillance capitalism, the other on state-controlled mass surveillance. When nations in the global South choose a technology provider, they are not just using or buying a specific infrastructure, they are implicitly aligning with a certain architecture of social and political control, and their collective choices will help determine which model gains global ascendancy. This brings me to the second part of my talk, virtual power, how AI shapes political reality. So how does AI specifically engineer these virtual fields of potential? Let me highlight three important mechanisms. First, through algorithmic identity formation, a process detailed in Shoshana Zuboff's theory of surveillance capitalism. The machine learning models that power our social media feeds are not neutral conduits of information. They are engines of identity construction. Based on what Zuboff calls behavioral surplus, our clicks, likes, and shares, they build a predictive model of who we are and, more importantly, what we could become. Then they feed us content that reinforces and refines this model, creating powerful vectors that pull our identities in specific directions. The second mechanism is the engineering of collective affect. AI systems on social media optimize for one primary metric, engagement. And as research consistently shows, the most effective driver of engagement is high arousal emotion, particularly outrage, fear, and indignation. A 2021 study by William Brady et al., for instance, used machine learning to analyze millions of tweets and found that the platform's reward mechanisms systematically teach users to express more moral outrage over time. Critically, users in political moderated networks were more sensitive to this feedback loop, suggesting a clear mechanism for how moderate groups can become radicalized over time. These platforms are, in effect, massive mood regulation machines for entire societies. They can sense latent anxieties and amplify content that channels them toward a specific target. This is a process I mentioned earlier. An algorithm can turn a diffuse economic frustration into a targeted, explosive anger against a specific group, transforming the virtual potential of emotion into the material force of political action. Third, and most critically in the age of LLMs, is the control of the narrative landscape. Generative AI represents a significant development here. The issue is not longer just isolated fake news that can be fact-checked. It is the capacity to flood the entire information ecosystem with infinite, plausible, context-specific, and infinitely varied content at near zero marginal costs. Such a strategy is called cognitive shaping. The goal is not merely to make you believe one false thing, but to erode your ability to distinguish between truth and falsehood altogether, dissolving the shared reality necessary for rational political debate. This directly attacks the very possibility of the ideology critique I mentioned earlier. That critique requires a shared ground of reality to argue over. When AI can generate entire internally coherent virtual realities, complete with bespoke justifications for outrage and identity, the basis of this rational debate dissolves. Sorry, I have.
Yeah.
This leads me to my last. Sorry. We are left not with ideology, but with a pure, overwhelming propaganda that operates beneath the level of conscious belief. This leads me to my last part, highlighting where these mechanisms have the most profound and visible consequences. The Global South, a geopolitical proving ground in sight of real resistance. The dynamics I have described are global, but they are particularly acute in the Global South for several reasons. Many nations have experienced technological leapfrogging, with high mobile internet penetration coexisting with weaker institutional and regulatory frameworks. This makes populations more reliant on platforms like WhatsApp and Facebook for their news, and thus more vulnerable to algorithmic manipulation. Furthermore, the Global South is kind of virtual laboratory where these new technologies of power are tested, refined, and deployed before potentially being scaled globally. Let me provide two short examples to illustrate this aspect. First, the use of AI for recent elections. In the 2024 Indonesian elections, the winning campaign used generative AI to rebrand the candidate Prabowo Subianto with a history of alleged human rights abuses into a cuddly grandpa via AI avatars that went viral among young voters on TikTok. This campaign or its broader ecosystem also utilized deepfake videos, such as a prominent one showing the deceased former president Suharto endorsing the Golkar party. While Golkar was part of the coalition supporting Prabowo, it's not entirely clear if this specific deepfake was directly created by Prabowo's campaign. Still, it contributed to the disinformation that shaped the digital electoral environment. This is not just campaigning, it is the AI-driven production of political reality. Operating within what Deleuze terms the virtual, a realm of potent underlying forces, generative AI actively synthesizes and actualizes new political identities and narratives. Especially in the Global South, understood as a virtual region with complex emergent political actualities, this AI-driven architecture of a polarized virtual space transforms latent societal divisions into compelling, fragmented realities designed to materialize as a conflicted society on election day. A second example is the weaponization of information and conflict. The World Economic Forum identifies AI-amplified disinformation as a top global risk, fueling instability in fragile states. To illustrate this, we can point to the conflict in Myanmar. Following the 2021 coup, the military junta has extensively used social media platforms, particularly TikTok and Facebook, to spread pro-military propaganda and disinformation, often generated or amplified by AI. Reports from organizations like Human Rights Watch and Myanmar Witness detail how AI-powered tools are used to create realistic but fabricated content, including images and videos that denigrate resistant groups and promote a narrative of military legitimacy. However, it is of course also important to explore the Global South beyond a framework of marginalization and oppression. A powerful counter-narrative is emerging as activists and governments appropriate AI to assert technological sovereignty, not merely by replicating Western models, but by forging alternative pathways. To provide two brief examples here, the African Union is actively developing a continent-wide artificial intelligence strategy and a comprehensive data governance framework specifically designed to ensure that AI development serves local needs, respects diverse cultural values, and prevents data exploitation by external actors. Simultaneously, India is pioneered as a digital public infrastructure approach where AI is viewed as a public good, leveraging open source technologies for large-scale applications in health, finance, and education. This creates inclusive digital ecosystems that prioritize social benefits and local innovation over purely commercial interest or reliance on proprietary Western tech. This represents a profound political project of sovereignty, a conscious effort to avoid becoming mere data colonies and to architect a fairer technological order rooted in shared struggles, collective well-being, and a common political destiny that prioritizes local context and sustainable development over profit-driven global expansion. I come to my conclusion. The thesis I have put forward is that we cannot understand our current global crisis without understanding its virtual dimension. Under conditions of a post-digital form of information processing, AI has become a key architect of this virtual space, a space of potential shaping our political identities, collective emotions, and our very sense of reality. The Global South is a crucial area of this transformation. It is in itself a virtual construct in our global discourse. At the same time, it's a geographical space and a material testing ground where the future of AI-driven politics is being forged. The task for AI area studies is therefore to explore these new architectures of virtual power, analyze the highly context-dependent material consequences, and discuss critical perspectives and political options so that we are hopefully able to navigate these profound challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas. A really wonderful presentation and quite thought-provoking, especially in the sense of how we navigate that tension you mentioned between the virtual and geopolitical reality and the political economics of AI, especially as they impact the global South. We have about 25 minutes left, so I'd like to start our discussion with a question, perhaps for both speakers, and then I also would like to make sure we leave time for the audience to have their questions addressed as well. In both of your talks, you present, a stark reality in terms of AI and its uses, its impact on society, on individuals. And in both presentations, you provide some optimism, but also a lot of caution. And there seems to be the crux of that seems to be around how do we regulate, mediate this technology so that it doesn't get away from us, so that we don't lose the thread of knowledge, we don't lose the sense of authenticity of information, which is something I think archives and libraries have been good at ensuring, but also that this doesn't just become another political tool that we have to navigate. So I guess then my general question then, what do these concepts of mediation, concepts of regulation, what do they mean in an AI environment? And specifically, what do they mean for archivists and librarians who have a very strong sense of mediating knowledge and organizing it and that knowledge, but that seems to be potentially in many through AI technology. So if we could just talk about this idea of mediation and regulation, and what does that mean, and perhaps what does that look like for libraries and archives?
Okay, fantastic. So perhaps I can start. Thank you so much for the question, Steve. So I work in the UK, but I'm from France originally. So as you know, there are a lot of initiatives in the European Union, to regulate artificial intelligence. The UK context is quite different, obviously, since Brexit. We are no longer part of the European Union, obviously. So I think, this is a big topic at the moment, right? Is it possible to regulate AI? What will be the impact impact on the GLAM sector? And really, I don't have any, the right answer to that, because that's such a big issue. But I think perhaps, a smaller question might be, when you have collections in the GLAM sector that could be trained, like AI could be trained on this, is it right to do that? Is it right to make accessible those records, so that AI tools can be trained on the data from the GLAM sector? Or is it perhaps wiser, to withdraw access? Again, it might depend on the collections, but this is really a question that probably all archival institutions at the moment have to ask, right? So perhaps, Andreas, you would like to add something here, because you're based in Germany, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, the question of regulation is very important, also for our research project in a way. I mean, we are also affected by the question of regulation, the AI Act and so on. So basically everyone is affected by it. And I can tell you, I mean, it's not that easy to come up, for example, with an information consent document or a data management plan that really works for ongoing research as we do it in our project, How is AI Changing Science? Because there is no ready-at-hand document that you can use. You have to come up with your own guidelines and then if you have, worked out everything perfectly as you think, you might, at some point come to the conclusion that this is not the case, that you forgot something and something perhaps important to include. And what are you doing then, right? To just rework the information consent paper or the data management plan and actualize it and send it back to the people that you interviewed. This is not really working, right? And also sometimes people just forget to make their crosses at the right places to what they actually are consenting to. If they are consenting to, for example, using proprietary AI models, some people are just fine with it, but they do not highlight the specific place that we put in the text. They just forget about it and just declare, yeah, we are happy with everything you do with using your models, and I'm fine, because they do not just read the whole document. These are very simple examples from our research, but it kind of highlights a certain discrepancy between what people think in these AI ethics experts gremium and what the reality of research is looking like. And it really does not work well together. And it would really help if people had experience with ongoing research would be part of these committees. But oftentimes it's not the case. And I think this is a real problem, that we do not have this strong relationship to ongoing research.
Right. Thank you both much. I just wanted to pause and see if anybody in our audience has any questions before proceeding with others that I may have. We have about a little bit more than 10 minutes.
Steve, I don't see any posts on the chat.
Oh, okay. I think people are absorbing all of this content because it's really been fantastic. I'd like to follow up that question then.
There is a question just coming up here.
Oh, great. I'll read it out in case people can't see their chat. Katie Calderon asks, how do you think AI can either encourage or help to overcome censorship? For context, I work in Cuba.
Maybe I start. So, of course, this is not a question I currently work on. I have to say that I currently do not work on questions of censorship. But yeah, I mean, for sure, AI is more a useful, let's say, tool to help censors in their work, for sure, instead of, kind of being the opposite, a kind of counter tool for, I don't know, for making structures of censorship visible or whatnot. I mean, of course, we could use AI, come up with generative AI, using generative AI tools to, I don't know, create a film on censorship, for example. I mean, of course, this would be a counter strategy, so to speak. So with all these creative activities that we have, and AI supports this, of course, this could also be tailored on questions of censorship. But if it comes to, can AI kind of be the countermeasurement to, I don't know, to circumvent structures of oppression or censorship, I would be rather skeptical. But as far as I know, there's not much research on that, at least not from I mean, of course, we have a lot of research when it comes to how it's AI used for political oppression in China and elsewhere. There's some considerable research. But if you look the other way around, how AI might be used to kind of circumvent and oppose these structures, there's not much research on that yet. So it could be an interesting research area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. I think I'm trying to find a specific example here. And perhaps, going back to my point about AI applied to colonial photographs, AI could be used, for example, to identify images that have been changed, that have been modified. And, that would go back to the question of censorship. So I think there are many ways in which AI could be used, to address censorship, like, photos, again, that have been modified. But as Andreas mentioned, I don't think that there have been a lot of research on this. And, this is actually, topics that I would be interested to explore in the future. I talked about my work on government archives, so this would definitely be relevant. So thank you so much for the question. I think it's very thought-provoking, really.
Thank you. We have another question from Xiang Li. The question is, what AI-related skills do you believe are essential for area studies librarians to develop in order to stay relevant and effective in their roles? And I might add to that, leaving this forum today, what should be our first priority in terms of a skill or a basis of knowledge or a theorist that we should be looking at?
Yes, so that's a very good question, because there are two ways to answer this question. Either you could say, okay, it's important to become more computationally aware, to develop the skills that are closer to computer science than traditional archival studies skills. Okay, so that would be one option, really, to develop those technically advanced skills. But the other option is to develop collaborations, with computer scientists, with people who have this kind of advanced technical knowledge. And this is more the way I've been following, as a humanities scholar. Of course, I know a lot about AI, but I'm not a computer scientist. I don't aim to do like a PhD in computer science. And perhaps, this is also relevant to archivists today. Perhaps, the objective would not be to become, like super advanced at the technical level, but more, to know how to work with computer scientists, to develop those collaborations. I think that could be an objective, really. But perhaps, Andreas, you would like to add something on this question?
I would say I basically agree with you here. Maybe I would also add perhaps that it may really make sense to combine these two strategies, right? As you suggested, implicitly suggested to do so, right? To become more computational for sure is helpful. Also, it has become so much easier for everyone. So with, just asking any large language model on, computational questions, and the answers are in general quite good. I mean, for sure enough to get started. And of course, we have seen now, I mean, very advanced reasoning models since 2022 with Minerva and others. So even if you're going, you know, and you're really going very advanced in computer science, even there, large language models are helping. So this is what we can see here is clearly a crisis of expertise, also of traditional computer science. I mean, this is for sure. And it also kind of reshapes, Lise, your question, right? I mean, having now this very profound and tools and yeah, it's for sure a game changer in how we make use of the tools, how we collaborate with computer scientists and so on. So we can, you know, very easily question now their knowledge even, right? Which would not have been so easy to do before, let's say, 2022 or 2018 or something like that, right? So that's for sure a game changer. And yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage people to make use of large language models to improve their knowledge. And of course, they still need to fact check everything, just not to simply believe what they are reading or what the output is. But yeah, it's for sure a good thing to embrace them, so to speak, in a critical way.
Great, thank you. I'd like to call people's attention to the chat. A few people have added links to articles, both focused on the multilingual question regarding LLMs and the languages that are available to some of these models. So I think maybe a broader question that may get to the AI area studies question a bit more precisely is, how should area studies librarians be addressing this language and linguistic gap within LLMs? We have, some of us, very vast collections of materials we've collected over hundreds of years. Some of that's been digitized, some hasn't. Should we be aggressively trying to make sure this material is included in LLMs, or is it something that we should be working more thoughtfully with our colleagues in the places from which we're collecting to have them select and control what's available to LLMs?
Yeah, so of course, when we talk about LLMs, as we all know, the dominant language has been English, but of course it's expanding towards a lot of other languages. Just to give a practical example here, again, going back to my ICON project, on AI and colonial photographs, if we look at those colonial photographs, when there is metadata, it's often in the colonial languages, like English, French, Dutch, etc. Of course, it's not always and very rarely actually in local languages. And this is an issue, of course, if we want to make those colonial photographs more accessible, to users around the world, we need better metadata. So I think here, AI can definitely work, to create those metadata automatically at scale, because we are talking about, huge amounts of data here. So that's one way of answering the questions, really. But again, that's a really broad question on AI and, the various languages that are, useful here. So perhaps, Andreas, you would like to add something here.
I mean, of course, a part of our group, a person who is part of our group is Alexander Weibel. He has he's a big expert in machine translation and speech recognition since the 1980s. So it would be probably interesting to talk with him about that. But of course, I mean, we had a lot of conversations with him about that, because we also wanted to use AI to study AI. And his idea was always that it's also linked to speech. So what we did in our group was, coming up with a speech summarization tool. And then now we have, these new capabilities of large language models, which were also quite a game changer for us, as you can imagine, right? So, and multilingual, problems of multilinguality is, of course, something we have to address. as we have to address problems of noise when it comes to speech and whatnot. And of course, the very unstructured nature of speech, just think about, classical scientific talks are not always very structured. So this can also, or at least the scientific discussions we have are sometimes very unstructured. So this is very interesting, training material also for us as a group to deal with that and to provide adequate summarizations of the content and well-structured content. So this is something we worked on. And yeah, I mean, the problems and the failures we are talking about at some point in history can very easily disappear in 1 or 2 years. But they can also perhaps last a little bit longer. It's hard to predict that, really. I can tell you from experience. So I have done some predictions that were entirely wrong. So and I was following. I thought I would have made a good guess, but I did not. So yeah, its problems is that's probably a problem of the current AI discourse, that we always still speculate very much, which is good because speculation is also a critical technique. So we need to speculate in a way, but then again, we are often so many times simply wrong about what we think about will be happening in the future. And we should be, kind of careful with predictions. I mean, machine learning is quite astonishingly good with predictions, but it always depends on an environment which is not changing, right? I mean, machine learning would not work with a world that changes from 1 minute to the next. And sometimes our world feels like that. I mean, this is also an interesting discrepancy between what machine learning needs in terms of making predictions, which is a stable world, and again, our feeling, our sense of total instability, total insecureness, that these two logics kind of collide in a way. And then again, they are not. So machine learning still works with predictions in a totally unsecure environment, so to speak. So that's also something interesting to think about, I would say. I don't know if this makes sense. I mean, it goes a little bit away from the original question, for sure.
Great, thank you. We have one, I guess two last questions. One is focused more on area studies libraries and their traditional role in building collections that support research on specific regions. So more generally, how do you think AI and the new digital technologies that are rapidly emerging will reshape our approaches to building these collections and thinking about them?
So perhaps I can start with the first question on collection development, because I think all my work has been on access and trying to make materials more accessible to users, and I think that's really the big opportunity with AI at the moment. I mean, we have so many materials. The scale of those collections, that's absolutely enormous, and of course the GLAM sector is not super wealthy. There are so many issues with staffing, etc. So I think this is really our opportunity, to make those collections more accessible. I gave several examples in the talk, how to make those collections more accessible. But I would say, especially for librarians in area studies, that's a big opportunity, really.
I have not much to add here. I mean, of course, I already mentioned the summarization aspect, which is of course important for collections, right? If you are able to provide good summarizations of a certain collection, that would be helpful, or of an individual work even, that would be helpful if it's really accurate, and make sure that's accurate. Because I mean, it's very tricky sometimes to come up with a technical solution for that. So that's one point. I mean, of course, basically, I would even argue that you could AI for everything connected to collections, actually, right? I mean, this is just a question of research now, right? It could be about the presentation of collections, using AI for that. It could be, just getting the data. It's about perhaps Moderating the access to collections could be there you could use AI for. So it's hard to imagine some aspect of collections where AI is not of use. But it always has certain implications, and it's really a moving target. You're not really knowing what you are dealing with at the moment. That's the hard thing, and for all of us. So if you're an expert in with archives or libraries or whatnot, or in area studies, or if you are really an expert in AI, you always get surprised. I can tell you, I mean, I've talked to the most, profound experts in machine learning, and even then, they are always constantly, always even on a weekly basis surprised by something happening in the field. So yeah. But this is it's a kind of dangerous situation, because no one is really able to have the full picture or the big picture. It doesn't matter if you have a 10 years experience or 20 years experience. In the situation we are in now, it's really hard to have an overview because of the speed of research progress, but also because things are changing so quickly. I mean, just think about how fast the generated adversarial networks have been sort of replaced by the diffusion models in terms of image generation. So that was quite quick, yeah, and happening in very few years. It's just one of many examples I could give you for these kind of developments. And yeah, we will see how it goes. But it's always good, to be a little bit more pessimistic than optimistic. It's the same with the Leviathan. Thomas Hobbes' vision of the Leviathan, the state. You cannot build a state on the assumption every human is a good human. It's not possible. You always have to assume that, some humans are not so good and they could harm you. And the same with AI, right? So you can't assume that you can build a state, or you can build a society, or organize a society, or live in a society with AI with the assumption everything will work well. So this is not wise. So you always have to, speculate indeed about also bad outcomes and scenarios. And this is what we all should do, but in a very informed way, right? In a very, very informed way. Do not jump to conclusions, I would suggest.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess mentioning Hobbes gets us back to the question of mediation and regulation. What Leviathan is going to control these AIs? I'd like to thank both of our speakers and really appreciate your perspectives and insights. We've covered a lot of territory here, from applications within the archive community, and then also more on the geopolitical and political economic front in terms of what we can expect and what's trending in terms of AI's use as a tool for legitimacy at the political level. So I'd like to thank you both and hand the mic back to our colleagues to talk about what's next for the group.
Well, I would like to just thank both the presenters, Professor Lise Yelent and Andrea Sudman, and to Steve Witt for his moderation as acting as a moderator for this session. Thank you again. We really appreciate your time, and I hope everybody enjoyed the presentations. I also posted a survey link. It would be wonderful if you can just take a minute or two to complete this survey. With that, I think this session, I'm officially announcing the the session. That the session is over for now. Thank you.
Thanks also for the questions and for the invitation again.